Hey everybody, it's Lisa. I am sorry I'm gone. I am in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, giving a paper to a conference. So I'm hoping this works. I am using an app on my iPad called Explain Everything, and I've had some pretty good luck with it before. You may want to consider using it for yourself. You can download it for about $5, I think, maybe 12. And I uploaded the PowerPoint from class, and you can adjust it and move it and record with it, and it becomes a YouTube video, which makes it very accessible. So we're going to give this a shot. I hope this works. Again, I am sorry for kind of the inconvenience of covering really important material while we are, doing this, and I'm not even there. So anyway, let's move to some housekeeping. Okay, so there's been some confusion on how many times to post and if it's okay to post your UbD resource separate than your actual essential questions. And of course that's fine, and hopefully you guys were able to get that information, and if not, just make sure you correct it as soon as you can, because the resource that you have to post has to be original, and you have to comment on two other peers' resource. And the objective on that is so that you can be more exposed to UbD ideas and materials, and realize that this is not something that anyone gets quickly or easily. And so there's a big community of people out there that have already gone through the trouble of making templates, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel here, and that's good. You're also supposed to give it a shot to try to write your essential questions. And just keep in mind, we're not asking for perfection here. We want an attempt. This is all just putting our toe in the water and seeing, how this fits with us, and, kind of really getting to understanding by design. So the last thing that you probably need to know is that under the part of your week 6 discussion, it says lecture and questions. And I will try to post this video here on the discussion part, but definitely in the content part, which is kind of funny because you'll already have found it by the time if you actually can hear my voice. But answer the questions that are in the discussion thread, and they're very simple. Kind of let me have a chance to know what you're thinking and about your learning, and I would appreciate it. So that is all part of your work for week 6, and as long as you can get the lecture questions in by Sunday the 21st, that's good with me. So your posting has to stay at the regular time, due right before class period, but if you want to post the lecture questions and your answers, do it by the end of the day, Sunday, February 24th. Wait. First, Sunday, February 21st. Okay, are you excited? Yay! Understanding by design. I did realize, though, that in most of my materials it says UBD and the B is not small, and in all the other resources it's a small b, which is, my apologies, I'll have to try to fix that in the rest of my materials. So yay, here we go. Okay, so this is one of the things that we would cover directly in class. If you were sitting there, I would ask you to turn to the people next to you and kind of discuss what was the best designed learning experience that you've ever had. Learning experiences can occur just from every part of our life, and a lot of my memories seem to include learning experiences. But what about that designed learning experience? Can you remember a good lesson? And when you're thinking about that, what is in general true about a good design? Regardless of what the course is covering, its content, or the style of the teacher, what do we know about a good lesson design? Giving you a little bit of think time there. As you ponder these questions, as you ponder and answer these questions for yourself, think about expectations, learning activities, and assessments, because these are all inherent parts of understanding by design, and really any curriculum designing. Okay, let's just say it again. I've said it a couple of times, but I really needed to go in because this is a question on your midterm exam. Understanding by design is synonymous, aka, with the idea of backwards design. Understanding by design was designed and promoted as designing curriculum backwards. And honestly, UBD was not the first one to do it, but they were the first one to market it and to really be out there and, as a presence and really have the materials to help people understand how to do it. So Wiggins and McTighe didn't come up with the idea, but they definitely figured out how to get people to use it. So understanding by design equals backward design. Okay, so there are 3 stages of backward design. You know, and you've already read something about essential questions and things like that, but this is taking it a step backwards. So if you just want to understand how backward design works, overall, this is kind of what it is. So the first stage is going to be just really to identify the desired accomplishments. Oops, can't fit it in there. Oh, my writing. So identify desired accomplishments. Hope you can kind of figure out that that says accomplishments. You know, what is supposed to happen when you're planning this design? What are you going for? The second thing, the second real stage, once you've got what you understand is the accomplishments that are supposed to come out of your curriculum. The second part of understanding by design is determining acceptable evidence. If you've got a good idea and you have an understanding of what you want the students to accomplish, how are you going to measure that to know that you've done it? Because assessment is an important part of understanding by design. It's going to really propel you forward in understanding, did I really teach what I was supposed to teach? You know, is there a level of understanding and transferability going on with these students? So understanding what your assessment measures are ahead of time and really giving that a thought is an important part of UBD. Okay, so the third step, and this is the final step, and you only get to the third step after you've done the identifying of the accomplishments and the determining acceptable evidence, your assessments. Then you get to plan the learning experiences, right? This is your instruction, and this is your activities. So, sorry, wild finger. So this is kind of what ends up happening. You get an idea for a good set of activities that you want to do, and that sort of drives your curriculum design. And understanding by design has a really strong understanding that that's typically what propelled teachers forward, and so that actually comes last. While you might still have this in your mind for your own curriculum unit, don't worry. Just put aside what those activities are and make that secondary to coming up with the first 2 stages here. And so let me repeat that one more time. Don't worry if you already know what your instruction or what your activities in your curriculum unit are going to be, or have a general idea of that. Put that aside for a while and really try to go back to the first stage and the second stage. And then your activities will fall in line and they'll become even easier to put in. It'll fit together like a puzzle. Okay, so stage 1. Okay, here's what is going to happen. This is what we're going to accomplish. All right, so establish goals. Identify one or more goals, and it's okay that they're content standards, course or program objectives, and learning outcomes that the design targets. All right, that can be part of your goal. Standards are not, evil. This is one of the places where they go, and it is useful. All right, really try to understand in stage 1 what understandings are desired, okay? Some people would say this when they would say students will understand that, and then you've seen this before, fill in the blank. Identify the enduring understandings based on transferable big ideas. They give the content meaning and connect the fact and skills. All right, and here, this is what we've been reading about, and here it is. What essential questions will be considered? Frame the essential questions to guide student inquiry and focus instruction for uncovering the important ideas of the content. All right. And lastly, what key knowledge and skills will students acquire as the result of these units? Students will know, students will be able to. I still have a problem with saying that. We were so taught to do that, SWBAT, SWABIT, and there's such a negative connotation to it. But it still helps me frame in some ways. What am I asking them to understand? What am I asking them to do? What am I asking them to know? And really separating out, these pieces. Okay, so in this part, you want to identify the key knowledge and skills we want the students to know and be able to do. The targeted knowledge and skills can be 3 different kinds. Now, I thought this was a bit confusing, so hang on with me. So what you want them to know or do can come from several different places, because knowledge and skills can be background information. It can be lots of things. So they can refer to building blocks for the desired understandings. What you want them to know or do can refer to the knowledge and skills stated or implied in the goals. Or what you want the students to know or be able to do can refer to the enabling knowledge and skills needed to perform complex assessments and tasks identified in Stage 2. My big thing about Stage 1 is write and rewrite. This is not something that happens when you sit down and think about it and you write it down once. This is a lot like constructing a narrative. You really want to be able to write this down, erase it, go back, because I don't know about you, but I have an idea. And then when I read it all the way through again, I realize that I've gone a little off track with what I really wanted them to do. And it doesn't really fit in with what my overall goals and what I wanted to accomplish with the design. So I would say work and rework what you think you're trying to accomplish in Stage 1 and then move forward from there. Okay, we're spending a lot of time on essential questions today, and it may or may not be as useful to you as other things, and I don't want to give you the wrong impression that it's somehow more important than anything else, but understanding an essential question will drive the next phase of this forward for you. So just in general, here are some examples of a essential question. How do the arts shape as well as reflect a culture? Okay, so this can be a question for, a 3rd, 4th grade class. What would be non-essential is if you asked specifically what common artistic symbols were used by the Incas and Mayas. Okay, another example of an essential question is, what do effective problem solvers do when they get stuck? The non-essential version of that is, what steps did you follow to get your answer? I think I've seen that on a workbook page before. Okay, another example of an essential question is, who is a true friend? Non-essential would be, who is Maggie's best friend in the story? Now, the first thing you should notice is your non-essential questions are closed questions. They have answers that don't require thought, but only a kind of a regurgitation, I can't think of another word, a regurgitation of knowledge, it's factual knowledge. It doesn't involve a real probing of any kind of understanding. And so if you ask in your design, if you know the kind of questions you're trying to ask students and trying to get them to think, your lessons reflect a deepness that they wouldn't have otherwise. Okay, sorry this slide is so hard to read. So a few other examples of essential questions. When and why should we estimate? How can we measure what we cannot see? If practice in the arts makes perfect, what makes perfect practice? I'm not actually sure why that's just about the arts, but oh well. Why do people move? How do effective writers hook and hold their readers? All right, so just in general, here are some characteristics of essential questions. Essential questions are, by nature, open-ended, thought-provoking, and intellectually engaging. And yes, we mean that from pre-K all the way up. We also want essential questions to result in higher order thinking. They are related to important transferable ideas, likely to raise additional questions, and that is what you know has your kids hooked and engaged. I love that. Not answered but supported or justified, recurring over time, worthy of revisiting. Essential questions really are the part that make me excited about designing the curriculum. I can have a big idea, an overarching kind of theme for a unit, but really the essential questions are what keep me engaged. And you can keep an essential question and design and redesign your assessments and your activities. In the beginning part, stage 1 remains the same, because this part is really kind of what gets a lot of people excited. So that's good. Okay, so in the middle of our essential question talk, we have a slide about Bloom's taxonomy. Because ultimately what happens, and this is just kind of a visual reminder, I don't know if you've ever seen the Bloom's taxonomy as a butterfly before, but you are still working within this framework. We haven't ventured off into some strange academic idea. When you have an essential question, what you're going to ask your kids to do through the learning of those of the elements that surround your essential question, you will be asking them to create, evaluate, analyze, apply, understand, and remember. So this is still an important part, and we're still moving this direction, and I think we're just showing you this because it's helpful to remember. Back to essential questions. Okay, so to continue, essential questions are important and timeless, elemental, foundational, and vital or necessary for personal understanding. To move beyond the factual remembering of just rote knowledge and rote memorization, children have to be able to connect their understanding personally and with other subject matter. They have to be able to connect their learning through really all of their experiences. And those essential questions should get kids, motivated to ask their own questions. It should get them to think more deeply about a topic. I keep envisioning a debate surrounding by the end of a unit, what people think about an essential question, and having to defend your stance, and that's the great thing about essential questions, because there's no one answer. Okay, so why are essential questions important in curriculum planning? Well, first of all, they make a person consider the big ideas. They also provoke deep thought. I think we've already kind of covered that. They require students to consider alternatives and justify their thinking, which automatically makes them more responsible for their own learning. And that is engagement, folks, and that is beautiful. It can spark meaningful connections, create opportunities to transfer to other areas. All right, so I was kind of thinking about this. It is difficult to begin anything new, and I think it can be so overwhelming when you're starting a curriculum unit. And you can begin any way you want, write it out, sketch it out. I have lots of notebooks filled with just chicken scratch handwriting, but maybe if you're more of an organizational learner, if you're a logic-minded, multiple intelligence person, you might enjoy concept mapping. And so I was trying to think of a way to make this useful. We don't have a specific example in class except for the mythology unit. I'm not sure you can read that. Let me try a little bigger here. Okay, so let's say we were working on trying to design a mythology curriculum unit. So we know there are certain things we want by the end. We knew at the start of this unit, we wanted them to write their own myth. But one of the essential questions I think that goes really well with this, for me, is to understand and ask, why does humankind create stories? Okay, you can probably barely read that. And it doesn't cover 2 topics, but it covers 1. Okay, so in fact, that may look like a hot mess. But anyway, so, that would be an example of an essential question that would go with a mythology unit. What why have historically humans created stories? What purpose do the stories and the myths that we have serve, and what goes with that? And so that would be just a good way to start thinking. I may have an activity in mind, but that's not really going to get me to what I want to accomplish with the students, what exactly I want them to be able to build their learning, in order to get the best possible product that I can get. I don't know if this is going to be particularly helpful for you, because in all of the examples, if you go back and replay this video, I don't believe that any of the essential questions used these verbs, but this is just one of those resources that kind of, that they throw out there to try to see if it's useful. So my best thinking is that if you want ultimately to design, and your essential questions you hope moves towards the students to have an explanation, you can use verbs like connect, demonstrate, describe, justify, model, prove, show, and teach. If interpretation's more your goal, illustrate, make sense of, provide metaphors, tell a story. And let me just pause there. Providing metaphors is a terrific quick assessment of, if students understand, and you've used metaphors a lot in your class. It is a great way of just doing a quick check of understanding. So you can never underestimate the power of a metaphor. Yay, figurative language. Anyway, if you are going for application, verbs like adapt, build, decide, design, propose, and solve may be helpful. It's also important in essential questions that you can include elements for the students to understand a shifting perspective, empathy, or self-assessment. Okay, so overall, and we're still in stage 1 here, essential questions are useful, and the goal of using those are so that students can eventually propose their own essential questions. It's also important when doing essential questions that you realize that there is really no one answer. The very best questions, I almost think of like philosophical, kind of questions like they were listing earlier, there's not going to be one answer. And that in itself is going to be difficult to assess. So that's why we focus on that stuff a little bit later. Another goal of essential questions is allowing an understanding to spiral. That's for the children. Their understanding to spiral as essential questions are revisited as appropriate. So throughout your unit, you go back to that essential question, that thing that connects us and ties us all together. How close are we to coming back and understanding, you could say to your class, how close are we to understanding, why people tend to make, humankinds tend to make stories, creation stories, other kind of stories that we've been covering. All right, another goal is all involved in the educational process. Essential questions should be inclusive. Students, teachers, administrators, parents, community members. Learning that essential questions can advance skill building and knowledge making. I think the other part that I was thinking here is that, a good essential question is going to be completely neutral. There's no cultural, racial, gender bias, anything that can go wrong with your curriculum at this stage. If you have a good essential question, and it is broad and it is big, it doesn't matter where your students are coming from. It doesn't matter, what their level of success or difficulty is, their weaknesses in multiple intelligences. An essential question is completely useful for every student and able to be differentiated in whatever way it needs to be. Okay, so this is one of the things that I see a lot. If you are looking up a resource for Understanding by Design, you will always see this covered. This is what sells Understanding by Design as a design template, because this is one of the things that I think everyone can identify. There are always been a history of people who either make their teaching all about activity orientation, called activity-oriented teaching, where they're paying attention to only how engaging an event is, and they confuse hands-on work with minds-on work. And that page 9 is actually, it might be your Wiggins, or it might actually be from the handbook, Understanding by Design. So activity-oriented teaching is really only focused on what their little bodies are doing. And there's no real way of knowing if that activity has created the learning that was desired at the beginning of that. Activity-oriented teaching can look really great. Students are engaged, the teacher and students are happy. But ultimately, when you look at any assessment, an activity-oriented classroom is not going to have any kind of valuable information shown. There's no lasting effect on student learning. So there's also the other end of the spectrum, which is a content coverage kind of classroom, where they don't actually use who's in their classroom. There's no attention paid to the learner. Only thing that matters is the content. And I think a lot about my geometry teacher in high school when you think about content coverage. It was, I have this amount of time to cover this amount, so, learn it now, do it now, and very little to do with anything but just content coverage. Again, neither of those things lead to the ultimate goals from your lesson plans. Oh my gosh, we're only just now at stage 2. Stage 1 was so huge. Stage 2 is essentially your assessments, right? Determine acceptable evidence. What will show what you've been trying to work on, right? To what extent do the assessments provide fair, valid, reliable, and sufficient measures of the desired results? So you have this list of accomplishments that you're hoping for. You've gone through, all of stage 1, and you come up with a few assessments. But one of the things you have to ask yourself is it fair? Is this assessment of student learning fair? And I think, the last talk we heard about from the professor, Walzelek, was, that can differ depending on who the kid is. Fair is not always fair, right? Is your assessment valid? Is it actually measuring what you thought it would measure, or is it measuring something slightly different? Because that matters. Is your assessment reliable? Think a lot about, student, we ask students to work independently on things and turn in reliable work, but we don't always ensure that assessment was reliable. Did you ask enough questions? Is this a sufficient measure? Does it really show what you're asking it to measure? Do you really have a good assessment of that student's learning? And let's face it, good assessments are challenging because they are time intensive. Quick assessments are fabulous for our busy, fast-paced lives, but generally don't answer those kind of deep questions that come with a unit like this. All right, some other things to consider are asking yourself, are students asked to exhibit their understanding through authentic performance tasks? Are students, authentic performance tasks really don't come through on worksheets, which I know you guys already know. Another thing to consider is appropriate criterion-based scoring tools used to evaluate student products and performances. When is it important to use something that compares students, based on a criteria or based on other students' scores? Various appropriate assessment formats used to provide additional evidence of learning. I don't think I have anything to say about that. The assessments used as feedback for students and teachers as well as evaluations. And the part that I really enjoy is this one. Students encouraged to self-assess. If you have the time and students that are invested, self-assessments will lead to a true understanding of where that student is as they've moved through your curriculum unit. And it is never wrong to ask students to assess themselves. In fact, we encourage it at a higher level, and it should be done throughout our schooling. All right, we've made it to stage 3. You are getting close to the end of the video, I promise. Stage 3, plan learning experiences and instruction accordingly. Learning events. Now remember, Understanding by Design says do not come anywhere near stage 3 unless you have a good handle on your assessments and what you would hope to accomplish. Okay, stage 2 and then stage 1. So, to what extent is the learning plan effective and engaging? All right. So you should consider, will the students know where they're going? Do they understand their learning goals? Why the material is important? The reason for learning the content, and what is required of them, the unit goal, performance requirements, and evaluative criteria. Now, this is something I can't stress enough. We don't ever want to encourage the practice of surprising students with their own learning. Knowing what you're going to be learning at the onset of the learning is vital for students to make connections through the learning process, right? This should not be a surprise what they're going to learn by the end. Reasons that they're learning it should not be a surprise. What is going to be asked of them ultimately should not be a surprise. Also, while you do that, you want to keep them hooked. You want to keep them engaged into the big ideas. And I think that's one of the exciting parts about the essential questions and how you go and work on that, whether it's through inquiry, research, problem solving, experimentation. These, with the questions, should be so engaging. The students should be hooked. And this can happen even with, something that may not seem like a very riveting topic, but it's possible. All right, also things to consider is have adequate opportunities to explore and experience big ideas and receive instruction to equip them for required performances. Do they know what they need to know? Have sufficient opportunities to rethink, rehearse, revise, and refine their work based upon timely feedback. I love rework. I love it. I think it's awesome. Anybody who likes to redo work and will take the time to do it is more than welcome in my class to always do that, whether I teach little people or big people. The thing about that is very people will do it. Very few people will do it. All right, has there been an opportunity to evaluate their work? Do students get a chance to reflect on their own learning and set their own goals? And this is an important part of students and having a student-centered classroom. And it's probably one of the easiest things to forget when we design curriculum. Where's the place for the students? All right, also consider, is the learning plan tailored and flexible to address the interests and learning styles of all students? Is it organized and sequenced to maximize engagement and effectiveness? And the overall design, to what extent is the entire unit coherent with all the elements of the 3 stages aligned? Now, I know you wouldn't go through all the hard work of stage 1, 2, and 3 for these things not to be aligned. I think they're just being a little over picky right there. Okay, one of the last things we're going to do is we have an example taken from the actual Wiggins and McTighe UbD handbook. Okay, and it is getting pretty late at night here, and so I'm going to try to walk you through this because I put it in here because I really thought that this was an interesting way to see kind of the traditional way of curriculum design versus the UbD way. So I'm going to do my best to walk you through this. I don't know, you might want to just put me on mute and replay this section a little bit to see it yourself, but here it goes. So what you have here is kind of a traditional lesson plan, or what the authors believe is a traditional lesson plan. You've got the topic, Westward Movement and Pioneer Life, and it's for a social studies unit for the 3rd grade. You have activities and you have assessments. And so basically, let me squish it a little bit bigger here. Your activities include like reading a textbook selection, which would be kind of like a nonfiction, Life on the Prairie, and answer the end of chapter questions. Well, yay, that's engaging. The second activity is read and discuss Sarah Plain and Tall, and complete a word search puzzle of pioneer vocabulary terms from the story. I think I actually did this lesson when I was in 3rd grade. It's very familiar. The third activity is to create a Pioneer Life memory box with artifacts that reflect what life might have been like for a child traveling west or living on the prairie. And then it ends in a fabulous Prairie Day activity where you dress in pioneer clothes and complete the learning stations like churning butter, playing a 19th century game, send a letter home with sealing wax, play dress up, make a corn husk doll, quilting, tin punching. So there you go. And your assessments are that quiz on vocabulary terms from the worksheet that they did, the word search puzzle. It's the questions that you grade from the end of the chapter on Pioneer Life. The show and tell memory box, you can also assess their learning, and completion of the 7 learning stations during Pioneer Day. Maybe you're already starting to see some problems whether these assessments actually help us understand the students' understanding, the students' learning. All right, so if you took what we just saw, the traditional lesson plan, and you put it into this is a understanding by design framework. You'll see the established goals section, understandings, essential questions, students will know, students will be able to. Okay, there you go, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Here's your assessments, right there. Okay, and then your learning plan, stage 3. Okay, if I put this all from the previous slide and I put it on an understanding by design template, there are holes, and there are holes for a reason, because this example is to show that traditionally a traditionally designed lesson doesn't have the same ability to maximize your instruction for student learning. All right, so you've got a lot of holes. You don't understand what the children are trying to, you don't really understand based on those lesson plans what are the essential questions, what a child will understand, what they're going to actually do. It's mostly based on factual knowledge. I think we've got a little problems with Bloom's taxonomy here, and you've got some real problems with the assessments. All right, so if you redid, because we don't have to throw anything out, right? We're all about making better. So that unit was very special, so if you wanted to keep that unit, and you know that Prairie Day comes every year, what you can do is you can put it into the Understanding by Design template and then expand it. So all of a sudden you have, here's some state goals for social studies. Explain the lure of the West while comparing the illusions of migrants with reality of the frontier. Okay, now we understand really a little bit more of how to proceed, with student learning. We understand this, illusions of and to compare it with the reality of the frontier. This can drive your instruction a lot more clearly and more organized if you really know that that's one of your goals. I'm sorry you guys, I'm sorry it's so fuzzy and the copy didn't come out as good as I had hoped, but all right, so understanding. So all of a sudden we now have, students will understand that many pioneers had naive ideas about opportunities and difficulties of moving west, and people move for a variety of reasons. Successful pioneers rely on courage, ingenuity, and collaboration to overcome hardships and challenges. So hopefully when you see this, you begin to understand, well, if I see the goals first, do understandings and essential questions, really my activities further down, my learning activities are going to change. The more specific I am up here, I'm not just guessing at what they're going to know. I'm really going to control, what type of information, that we're going to be working on here. So essential questions for this unit are, why do people move? Why do pioneers leave their homes to head west? How do geography and topography affect travel and settlement? Why did some pioneers survive and prosper while others did not? What is a pioneer? What is the pioneer spirit? Okay, and you should be able to see a little bit more about what they know and what they'll be able to do. Now I'm going to give you a copy of these 3 pages, the before, the put into the UbD template, and then the revised unit with the UbD idea, as a way to kind of see the progression of what we do accidentally, what we do kind of naturally versus kind of working a curriculum designed the way of UbD. Okay, and even our learning plan is a little different here. We've got a KWL to assess prior knowledge. We've got a new Oregon Trail 2 computer simulation. I've never played that, or I heard it's really good. For Dress the Pioneer and ask for journal entries while a simulation is played. We've got, so Prairie Day got a revamp there. We've got a timeline map of a pioneer family's moving west. We've got more nonfiction sources, which is good. I don't even think we're doing Sarah Plain and Tall anymore. Let's see, review the scoring rubrics for a memory box, museum display, letters, and journals before students begin on performance tasks, and include opportunities for students to study examples of these products. All right, so this unit has become much larger. It's got many more details and student learning has been maximized. All right, I included this piece because I thought it was interesting. In the UbD text, they say that there are a few things to observe about that slide we just looked at, this updated unit. And one of them is that, the big ideas clearly are framed within the work. So the new essential questions for the revised unit are: why do people move? What is a pioneer? Why did some pioneers survive and prosper while others did not? And you're really trying to get to the ideas of migration, a conceptual definition, and what were the survival challenges. Other things that changed were the assessment tasks are more authentic and require higher order knowledge and skills. And the assessment evidence is varied and better aligned with desired results in stage 1. So your assessment actually really fits well with what you're hoping to get in stage 1. And this is an indicator of effective backward planning. The readings, fiction and nonfiction, computer simulation, and assignments are more purposefully goal-directed. And the Prairie Day activities remain, but the experience has been honed to better support the goals of the unit. So I think this is another example of never throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There is always something good to be saved with all of the things, that all the units and the things we tend to do every year, but really taking the time to see, where did Bloom's taxonomy fit? How does this stuff all fit together? And going through it backwards can be pretty valuable. Okay, I don't know about you. I am tired. Talking that much is very difficult. So I hope that made a little bit of sense. I hope everything is going well in your world. Just know that understanding by design can't be understood all at one time. It's something that you have to practice. It gets better over time, and it doesn't have to be done perfectly. Every move towards having a stage 1, 2, and 3 align is a better lesson. And, I don't know how many times I have taught the same unit with tweaks and adjustments and tightening over the years, and it's never the first year I do a unit. It's always the third or fourth year that I do a unit that something really amazing happens. And so, while you're trying to do your own curriculum unit or while you're thinking about your essential questions, keep that in mind, and definitely just know we're all just learning. The last thing is that next week we are having class. We will be together. I believe that date is something like Sunday, is the 20th, and Thursday the 21st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 24th, I guess. So Thursday the 24th, come to class. You don't have anything due except for your reading and your reading responses. I'm going to try to keep it normal for you so we can go back to normal. You are going to post on your next reading, which is Classroom Assessment for Student Learning, Doing It Right, Using It Well. That's under the content part of week 7. And you do your reading response, and then you reply to 2 others. And we are going to be well on our way to formative assessments and then our midterm exam. And so we've got a lot to cover. So please go ahead and write down your questions and answer the questions that I've listed on your discussion board, and let me know what's working for you, what's not working for you, and what you're thinking. See you guys next week.